Hello, and welcome to Advanced Manufacturing Now, the podcast for manufacturing professionals. Don't forget to like and subscribe to get new episodes delivered to your feed each week. I'm your host, Steve Plum, Editor-in-Chief for SME Media. I'm joined today by Keith Krach, CEO of Freedom 250, which was created last year to celebrate America's 250th anniversary this year. Keith is a former Under-Secretary of State, a technology entrepreneur who founded DocuSign, and chairman of the Krach Institute of Tech Diplomacy at Purdue University. Keith, welcome to the program.
Steve, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So in some ways, your life has epitomized the American dream, starting as a young boy working in your father's machine shop and going on to become the youngest vice president in General Motors history. So can you put it an event like the 250th anniversary of the country's founding into perspective and what it means to you?
Well, Freedom 250, Steve, is a once-in-a-generation national moment. And, more importantly, I think it's turned out to be a national movement. I feel like my life has been like Forrest Gump. I have lived the American dream. I've got to do a lot of things in my life. I've been blessed by this country. And so it's such a great honor to be able to be the CEO of Freedom 250 and lead the nation's 250th. It's not just about, kind of commemorating 250 years. It's about mobilizing the country for the next 250th. And 2.5 centuries ago, America introduced a radical idea that freedom belongs to every person and the rights come from God, not from government. And Freedom 250 brings that idea to life again. And at massive scale by inviting every American to participate, not just to observe. So, this is a national public-private partnership designed to connect American values, American innovation, American opportunity, and really to rally the nation around one mission, and that is recommitting to freedom for the next 250 years.
Talk a little bit about the triumph of the American spirit.
Well, if you look at the American spirit, it is a story not about perfection, but about perseverance. Through war, through crisis, and change, Americans have done the same thing over and over. Debated, struggled, corrected course, and recommitted to freedom. And that's triumph. I saw that growing up, as a boy. My mother lived through that when my father lost his job, and she didn't hesitate. She just goes full speed. And, it's kind of that mindset and that resilience and faith and forward motion that's the American spirit. And, you can see it throughout history, not just in, I think, our personal lives and our families and those kind of things. And so that's something to really celebrate, the perseverance and the ultimate triumph. And, working at the State Department, I had a chance to see these authoritarian regimes and also learn that, freedom doesn't come for free. And the natural order of things and the law of physics is the bad king, the dictator, and the emperor. And you've got to fight every day to keep that freedom. And I think if it wasn't for the United States, there'd be 100 countries that wouldn't even touch an ounce of freedom. Ben Franklin said as he was walking out of the Congress, what'd you guys do that? He said, well, we built a republic. It's a great thing if you can keep it. So you got to fight every day.
Yeah, a lot of people know about the founding fathers and have some of the very inspirational and very determined. But like you mentioned, it's not only the important the people that have made huge changes over the course of the 250 years, but it's also the mom and pop businesses, the people that make commitments every day to go to their work and maybe innovate and just be a part of a family and a community.
I mean, you're so right. I grew up as a kid working in my father's machine shop where I had 5 people in the good times and just me and him in the tough times. And he came over from Germany. He was living his dream. He was an entrepreneur. And you think about the heart of our economic engine, it's those small and medium-sized manufacturing companies out there that have always been the bread and butter, and it's the average American, um, who puts in a hard days of work to support their family. But most of all, they get to live free, and that's a gift that not every person gets on this planet, and that's a gift the United States gives us.
So you've been involved in some high-profile jobs and companies, organizations, and you started your own nonprofit and business with through Purdue. Um, Even so, this is kind of almost the capstone of a career where you're and put in charge of such a large initiative. Was it daunting for you?
Well, of course it's daunting because it involves all Americans, but what a great honor. Um, and you're right. It is what a great capstone, um, and to have it all be about freedom, whether it was on the factory floors in Detroit, whether it was, uh, on Wall Street, whether it was in Silicon Valley, or whether it was through public service when I was Undersecretary of State. I learned one key thing, and that is an enduring lesson: freedom matters, because when you have freedom, that enables innovation. When you have innovation, that creates prosperity, and prosperity creates stability, and that's the formula that built the United States. Um, and I could see that. Uh, and our role is to involve every American. We're integrating these massive signature events that we're putting on with all the initiatives from all the departments of the federal government, working with corporate partners, working with institutions, working with universities, working with civil society, working with local communities, and integrating it all into one big, it started off as a celebration. It's really mobilized into a movement.
I was looking at the website and all the activities that are planned and some that have already happened. You have the Freedom Truck, the State Fair in Washington D.C., the Parade of the Tall Ships, the Grand Prix, um, the Freedom Plane, the Department of Education components, the Student Art Fair. What are some of the things you're most looking forward to?
Well, I think, there's so many fabulous large events. I mean, I think the Great State Fair on the Washington Mall, between the Capitol building and the Lincoln Memorial, it's a huge area. All states are going to have pavilions there. We'll have different uh, pavilions with different themes. For example, innovation is a big one. I think that's going to be exciting, and that's going to be the weeks surrounding July 4th, and then on July 4th we're going to have the world's biggest firework display. It's going to be absolutely massive. Um, that's going to be exciting. And the Freedom 250 Grand Prix will be great. The tall ships will be amazing. We're going to do the rededicate, where it's a National Day of Reflection, May 17th. I think that's going to be spectacular. We're having the UFC fight on the front lawn on June 17th. Everybody wants a front row seat to that one. But I think, at the end of the day, the events that matter most are the ones that are going to be carried on at the local level. And I think that's what people remember. Our, you know, big focus of mine is make sure that everybody participates. And, I'm old enough to remember 1976, and I remember seeing watching on TV those tall ships coming in. But I really remember that block party we had. I remember holding that sparkler and seeing those fireworks, and singing the national anthem and the Pledge of Allegiance. That's, I think, what's going to be most memorable for people. And I think it's going to touch so many people's hearts, and I think it's going to change children's lives. And that's such a big focus is the youth. And we have so many initiatives around history and civics and those kind of things, and there's so many organizations taking part of that and providing toolkits and playbooks and all those kind of things. So I'm just I mean, I think I have the greatest job in the world, to be honest with you.
Yeah, when I was a kid, for the 200th anniversary, we went on a road trip though with the family, and went out to Boston and Philadelphia and DC, and it definitely made a lasting impression at the time. So will there be activities in all 50 states?
By the way, that's awesome. That's one of our initiatives is the American Road Trip, and we plotted it out with the Department of Transportation. General Motors did an app for it. All the different places you can go see, and we also partner really closely with the National Park Foundation. There's 451 national parks out there and historic sites, so there's so much to see, and I'm really. I hear a lot of families planning those kind of trips and vacations and road trips. And yeah, I mean, you never forget it, do you, Steve?
Yeah, I haven't been to all 450, but that's on my bucket list is to get to as many as possible.
Me
So,
too.
but this is also kind of a grassroots initiative I saw on the website where you can submit your own activity.
Yeah, so that's the beautiful thing about it. If you're going to do a celebration, organize an event, and then we love you to register with us so we can publicize it, so that people can come on the website and they can say, hey, I live in XYZ zip code or city, and what's going on this week around me. And this is a year-long celebration, and they can see that. So we're really encouraging people to register their events. And I mean, there's literally, man, I don't know, tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of different events going on and different initiatives. Everything from all the museums, we're working with 6,000 libraries. It's absolutely amazing.
So on the manufacturing and kind of the science and tech side, being a history buff, and with the 250th anniversary, any standout moments for you?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at manufacturing and engineering, that's the backbone of the story, right? Manufacturing guys, that represents problem solving, innovation, execution, pride in building. That's the world I grew up in. And that small machine shop taught me that trust, hard work, and craftsmanship still matter. And, the nation's 250th is not just about the founders, it's about the people who built everything that followed that. And this is their story as much as anyone. And it's certainly about innovation for sure. So, it's just right at home there.
So, we've gone through 4 industrial revolutions, at this point. So we call it manufacturing 4.0 these days. What do you see looking outward? It's kind of impossible to predict 250 years down the road. What about 5, 10, 20 years? What do you think is gonna? How quickly are we going to innovate?
Man, I'll tell you, to try to predict where we'll be 250 years ago, I mean, you got to have quite an imagination. I mean, if you look at where we were 250 years ago and where we are now, if you extrapolate, and I think that's actually accelerating, it's gonna be beyond belief. It's gonna be, we're gonna be flying around in cars and artificial intelligence. We're gonna have all kinds of stuff going on, and um, the dream is that we maintain that freedom and we have peace and prosperity. And I think that's one of the things that technology and innovation can provide the world. But I think in terms of democracy in the United States and freedom, I mean, it's up to the democratic nations to make sure freedom is maintained, because that's the most precious commodity, and that's the foundation for all this innovation and manufacturing and all these great things that await us there in the future.
Yeah, so we've seen, throughout the history of the country, and well before the founding of America, that nobody can really do it alone. That you take partnerships and alliances. What are some of the alliances for the Freedom 250, and how important has that been throughout your career?
Well, if you look at the companies I built or my time in government and what we're doing here at Freedom 250, it's all been about building coalitions, building networks. Started with the Ariba network, where we invented business-to-business electronic commerce, and now the Ariba network transacts $7 trillion of business over the Ariba network every year. And then the DocuSign Global Trust Network, 1.5 billion users, millions of companies, and you get that network effect. And then when I was Undersecretary of State, one of my key missions was to defeat the Chinese Communist Party's master plan to control 5G. And we did that with a thing called the Clean Network Alliance of Democracies, which was 60 countries, representing 2/3 of the world's global GDP, 200 telcos, a whole host of industry-leading companies, to build that coalition. And now at Freedom 250, we've built what we call the Freedom 250 Network. And that connects, countries, companies, institutions, universities, leaders, these big signature events, a local community, faith-based organizations, schools is such a big part of that. And, so you get that network effect. So I guess I've always been in the business of building networks at massive scale. And I think this one is going to be the biggest one.
That's for sure. Any standout people in history that have made an impression on you?
Oh, wow. I think there's a lot. The first one I think of was, and maybe it was one of the first books I ever read, was on Ben Franklin. I just love Ben Franklin because, he was a builder, he was a thinker, he was an entrepreneur. He had so many great sayings. He invented the almanac, discovered electricity. He was over there in France, getting that key alliance during the Revolutionary War. I know he was a little bit of a ladies' man, all that, because I saw a documentary on TV. But I think he's clearly one of my favorites, one of my inspirations. And I think a big reason behind that is because he had such great range. I've been blessed to do a wide range of things in my life. And I love astrophysics. I love space. I love the ocean. I mean, I've always been curious about those things. I think another leader, of course, would be Abe Lincoln. And I think his moral courage under pressure and what he endured and persevered. He had the death of his son while he was the president. And he just never gave up. Man, inspirational guy. When you read his words, he was just profound beyond belief. And of course, another one of my favorites is Ronald Reagan. he had the clarity about freedom's fragility. And I think he's probably one of the great leaders of the modern era. And bringing down the Soviet Union and peace in our time and all those kind of things. And I think he was a great unifier too. And each understood, I think, that freedom needed to be protected, renewed, and advanced.
Definitely three heavyweights that you just mentioned. And that pioneering spirit that Ben Franklin had. And speaking of pioneering spirits, we just had a monumental event within the last week with the traveling around the moon again and going back. How important is it to take a stab and go beyond what you're comfortable with and get out of the box and try to make a breakthrough?
But I'll tell you, it's everything. That is being an American. Get outside your comfort zone. I had the good fortune, because Freedom 250 was such a big part of the launch of Artemis, that I was down there for the launch, and it was just fabulous. I mean, it's the most powerful rocket we ever shot off, and what a great accomplishment! And it was pretty much flawless, other than the bathroom facilities. But that was the second launch I ever went to. The first launch I went to was about 25 years ago, because my roommate at Purdue, Greg Harbaugh, was an astronaut, went in the shuttle 4 times. And when he was taken off the last time, I took my oldest son to go watch the launch down at Cape Canaveral when he was about 10. And it was a life-changing experience for me, and particularly for him, because now he works for NASA, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and he designed the robot arm that's on Mars, on Perseverance, the rover. So, yeah, I think space and that new frontier there is more than just adventure and conquest. I mean, it's going to provide key resources in the future and all those kind of things. But also, very importantly, it inspires young people when it comes to STEM and science and engineering and math and technology. So I think it's really, really important. Plus, it's so cool.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure to meet 2 astronauts in my lifetime. Most recently, Eileen Collins was the first woman shuttle commander, but definitely inspiring. Like you said, it makes a difference in people's lives. And I recently met one of the original Rosie the Riveters, and still alive and going strong at over 100 years old, and inspiring the next generation of kids. Every time she comes out. Any teachers that made an impact in your life, and how important is it to get that type of mentorship, whether it's through a parent or an educator?
Well, I'll tell you, I had some great teachers growing up. I had some great coaches growing up. I think the one that I remember the most was my 5th grade teacher, Mrs. McCarthy. I was not the best student early on. I had a real problem reading, and she told me I was just so good in science. Now, I don't know if she believed it, but she told me that, and so I believed it myself, and that it really flipped me around. It was amazing. And I've had some great coaches, and I think you learn just as much out on the ball field as you do with the books. So I think that combination, and I think that mentorship, that passion, and my mom was a high school phys ed teacher, at a girls' Catholic school, and then she walk across the street and coach the boys' 9th grade wrestling team. That's my mom, and so I think teaching is perhaps the noblest profession in the world, because it's all about developing those young people, and a great teacher can really inspire them. And that's why I'm excited with Freedom 250. we have provided so many great tools and toolkits, and so have partners for teaching history and civics and all of that in this year. There's going to be some great things coming out. We're doing a red carpet premiere of Young Washington, which is going to be a blockbuster that's coming out on July 4th. We're doing that at the Trump Kennedy Center, and be all kind of materials to go around that. So there's so much out there. I just hope every family, every school, every institution takes advantage of this special time. And it's a year long. We're celebrating a year long. So it's not going to be done just this school year.
Right. Well, are there ongoing initiatives that you hope to see come out of this?
Yeah, absolutely. Freedom 250 was never designed for just a single moment. July 4th, 2026 is a launch point. And I think if we do this right, civic energy continues. And I think these partnerships will endure. And I think a new generation is going to be engaged, because we're not just celebrating this. I mean, what we're doing is we're strengthening. We said all along, it's about the next 250 years. And really, what we've seen is it's really created a movement. Everybody's jumping on the bandwagon, from CEOs. I mean, clearly the government leaders are. I mean, the people are. I mean, people who homeschool their kids, faith leaders, entertainers. I mean, artists. I mean, it's across the board. It's across the board. And it is such a unifying experience. I mean, who could argue with freedom? I mean, but I think it resonates. And it's such a great movement. I feel very fortunate to lead the nation in this.
Yeah, can't take it for granted, but you certainly should enjoy it and work to maintain the freedom. And one thing that you told me the last time we spoke about your parents, when your dad came home and had the idea of what he was going to do with the shop, and asked your mom what she thought, and I forget what exactly what he said, but it was just go for it. Don't even
damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, Butch. We're gonna be just fine. Don't worry about it. And that's a great attitude to have, because stuff's gonna hit the wall, man. And when it does, that's what tests your character. And my dad used to say, the object of the game is when the world hands you a sour sack of lemons, your goal is to turn it into sweet lemonade. And I think that's what this country's been all about. I think that's what President Trump has been all about. I really appreciate him allowing me to do this. And look, no, we never claim perfection, but we just keep going and going and going. And freedom unites us all, and unites us with our allies and those kind of things. I mean, I can't think of a more inspiring thing in the world.
Yeah, well, Keith, I know we're almost out of time, but thanks again for joining us. And I know I'm looking forward to participating in some upcoming events in Michigan. But where can listeners go if they want to learn more about Freedom 250 and events in their area?
That's great. Well, by the way, we're going to do a lot at the Detroit Grand Prix there, the week right after Memorial Day weekend. We have a great partnership with Penske. So that's great. Well, thank you so much, Steve. I appreciate it. And any of your audience who wants to find out more, you could just go to freedom250.org, and that's our website. You'll see all the activity there.
All right. And for the latest manufacturing news and other podcasts, visit advancedmanufacturing.org. And please remember to like and subscribe to our feed.